Hey, hey, hey. Welcome back to another Exchange podcast. I am your host, Deborah Faith. And today I have an amazing guest. Oh my God. I can't even believe she's sitting in the same room right now. I can't believe that she came and she accepted the offer. But we have Africa Lee Nelson in the building.
Hello.
Hello. And Africa to me is, oh my God, I've known you, I feel like most of my life. Well, not most of it, but most of my adult life, I'll say that. I met you back in 97, I want to say, while I was attending fashion school, business school. I know, a long time ago, right?
Many moons ago.
Many moons ago. And it's so funny because I met you through somebody that I grew up with. And we're really, I really don't even speak to her any longer. And me and you, I don't know. We just connected and we never lost touch. And we watched each other go through, I think, becoming from, what can I say? Becoming young ladies into women, into motherhood, you getting married. We've watched, I don't know, just each other evolve, so to speak. And I love you, first of all. I really do. I love you because you are one of those people that has watched me, I mean, good and bad times evolve. And our relationship has been able to evolve through that. You know what I mean? Yes. And I can't say that about everybody. But tonight we are actually talking about a very sensitive topic. And I said we've gone through good things, but we've also gone through some tough areas. And of course, we're celebrating, or not, I don't even want to say celebrating, but I want to say celebrating to a certain extent. We're celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month. And I say celebrating it because I think we haven't for so long, especially in our communities. It hasn't been something that we acknowledge, bring awareness to, or anything. And I was preparing for this month, and I told you this, mental health, you were one of the first people that came to mind because I really wanted to talk about suicide. And I was so afraid having, we talk about hard conversations, and I'll be honest with the listeners, so afraid to ask you because I know what you had gone through. And I wasn't sure where you were in that process, right? You lost your brother to suicide, probably about 10 years ago? 11.
April 16th.
Wow. And I just wasn't sure if you were ready. I mean, I know we talk about it, but coming to a podcast, coming to a place where people are going to hear you, see you, you know what I mean? It's different. So I was actually afraid to ask you to come on the show.
I can't believe you were afraid to ask me.
I was. And I'll tell you why. I actually told my business partner, me and her were talking, and I was just like, I really want to talk about suicide. And I mentioned you, and I was just like, I don't know if that's the right thing to ask. And when we went out to dinner and you were like, what's going on with the podcast? I was like, yeah, we're doing mental health awareness. And I shared that story. I was like, I was going to ask you to come on, but I didn't know how. And you were like, of course I will come on. And I was like, really? I was like, really?
After I thought about it for a second, like, oh gosh.
Yeah. But I was like, okay, I want to bring you on. And I want to bring you on, or wanted to bring you on more so because I think it's something we don't talk about. I know for me, I got the news through our mutual friend before I had even talked to you. I don't even know if you know the story.
I don't.
So I know, right? So I got the news through our mutual friend at that time. And I was such in a shock place. And I talked about this on the previous podcast. And I really didn't know, we talk all the time, right? But I didn't know what to say, or I felt like I didn't know what to say. And I remember driving to work. It took me a few days to even call you, and I knew, right? And this is just, again, I don't think I've ever told you this. And I was driving to work, and you were so heavy on my heart, and I wanted to call you, right? And I remember praying, God, what do I say, right? And God reminded me at that period of time, not that I knew what it was to lose somebody to suicide. But I had lost my sister at 12 years old as well. And I was like, I know what it is to be the older sibling and the responsibility I felt when I lost my sister. And I'll tell you this, I think not that it made my sister's death make sense, but it gave me a purpose in what I had experienced to even reach out to you. Yeah. So
Well, we did connect on that level.
we did. We
did.
did.
Because I'd
And
always knew that.
yeah.
So
So I think when I reached out to you, again, I still wasn't sure, but I was like, I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I do know the loss. I know great loss. I know, and I said this in the other podcast, I know what it is to feel like you have somebody in your hands and feel like they slipped through.
yes.
And I know the blame that I experienced, and I just want to, I not only want to celebrate AD's life, and that's why we have him up on the screen, but I really want to talk about, because I think that people don't understand how many people we're losing in the age range that we lost him to suicide. I did a little bit of research of that, and it's like 800,000 people a year. So that's like literally like roughly like we're literally you losing like every 40 seconds somebody's dying of suicide, and young people, right?
They're getting younger and
And
younger.
younger and younger and younger. So I want you first of all to tell the people about AD. Of course I want to talk about suicide, but I want to talk about the person. I want to talk about, I know that I knew from school, the one thing I remember is you loved your family, right? I know that and he was almost like your first baby, so to speak.
You got that. You hit it right on the head.
Yeah.
So before I had kids, it was him.
Yeah.
Because we were 13 years apart.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us just a little bit about him and just who he was prior to, of course, you losing him? Yeah.
Yeah, so his name was Aaron Derek Lee, but we called him AD for short. At the time of his death, he was 19.
Yeah.
But prior to all of that, he was just my only brother,
Yeah.
the baby of the family. We have a sister in the middle.
Gotcha.
Just a regular family of 5.
Yeah.
He was a father when he passed. He had a 10-month-old daughter.
Gotcha.
He was just silly, funny, your average teenager, but he loved sports.
Yeah, I know that. I remember.
He was great at football.
Yeah.
So his infamous number was 33. So you'll see the picture. Everything around him was 33.
Yeah.
He loved dogs. He had a dog at the time.
Yeah.
Loved riding motorcycles. Just your average kid. And he was a kid because he was 19.
He was 19. I have a 19-year-old, so he was still,
He's still
super
a baby.
young.
Yeah.
Baby. So I guess in all of that, so he's successful in football. He's, he was a handsome. You
Yes,
guys
he
were
was.
almost like twins. Like, so I guess in that, did you see like his behavior change? Was there something different that happened somewhere in there that you kind of saw happening and just probably thought it was, I know that whether it's boys or girls at 18, 19, you're just trying to figure it out. We don't, you know what I'm saying? We don't know kind of what's next. I know that from, me being 18 or 19, you're kind of trying to figure it out at that point. So can you tell me like what changed in that, or was there a change that you even saw?
No, so there was a change probably around 12 years old. You go through pre-puberty.
Yeah.
So we all have that like change of hormones and things like that.
Yeah.
Just around 12, 13, he really did start to change, have like some low times, just like, come on the low side. He was always like a quiet person, but he had moments where he didn't want friends. If he had friends over at the house, when he was tired, you had to go.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care what we doing. Bye.
You gotta go.
You gotta go.
He ready for his own alone time.
Yeah. So, as he went through the teen years, you kind of saw him, those times get worse.
Yeah.
But he'd bounce back. I'd probably say they got worse around 17.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I guess the worst times, did you just think, did you ever think he was depressed, or were you thinking that he's just kind of, it's girl? Because I think around that time it's hard. That's a very hard age. I also have a 14-year-old, right? So it's hard to gauge that. Like my 14-year-old now is like kind of, he wants to be by himself. He wants to be with his
Hmm.
friends. Sometimes he don't want to be around anybody. Again, it's kind of puberty. It's girls. It's all that kind of stuff. So do you think that you just kind of tied that to that, or the family in general, since he was such a go-lucky
Yeah,
kid? And
we did.
yeah.
But we also tied it to football.
Okay.
So he started playing football when he was 5 years old. We all
Okay.
know the statistics with concussions and head injuries from football.
Got you.
So when it
Wow.
got to a point, we started seeing the change in him, and some of the changes were just really withdrawn,
Okay.
um, pushing people closest to him away,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. He did have some attempts before. I don't want to say successful, but before
Yeah.
he did pass away.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like it wasn't just out of the blue.
Gotcha.
We did have other episodes. And so, we did have him checked out.
Gotcha.
He did ask to go to a hospital. So we did have other instances prior to that day where we saw the signs and we kind of just saw it escalate
Yeah.
to that point.
Yeah. So I guess when he was getting help in that place of like going to the hospital, because you said he had previous attempts, right? Did you feel helpless in that place of just like not being able to really assist him in that sense of things?
Absolutely. So I think the one that sticks out the most was the first one
Okay.
where he really, it wasn't that he attempted, but he was very adamant. Like, if I don't get help, this is what's going to happen. So it was just like, okay,
Okay. Let's
my
help
parents
you.
made sure he went and got help.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that did help. They check you in, they put you into an inpatient for a couple of days, they
Gotcha.
evaluate you. They give you medications. I remember him saying he hated the way the medication made him feel.
Wow.
And I've heard that from a
I've
lot of
heard
different
that from a
people.
lot of people, and I think we had not necessarily a mutual friend, but I know someone else that was close to a friend of ours ended up committing suicide as well. And I remember the part of the letter that she wrote was she was bipolar. I think that was her condition, I want to say, and they had put her on meds, and she said she couldn't take what the meds made her feel like,
Mm-hmm.
and that was kind of it. So in that, I guess, do you think the meds are helping people, or is that hard to gauge? I mean, I know we're not
We're not
therapists.
doctors,
We're
right?
not doctors. We, disclaimer. But do you think the meds were? I guess after he got help and he had meds at one time, was he supposed to continue doing
Yes.
the meds? Yeah.
Yeah, he was supposed to continue. I think, everybody is different.
Yeah.
For some people, the meds work and they work great. For
Yeah.
some people, they may need an adjustment.
Okay.
And for some people, they just don't like the side effects at all. Like, they hate the way that
It
they
makes
make
you
them feel.
feel.
And he was one of those that he hated the way it made him feel.
Yeah.
So it got to a point where I remember him saying to my mother that he just didn't want to take them. So, of course, that's not the best thing to do because, once you start taking something like that and then you just stop cold turkey, I think it makes it worse.
Gotcha.
So it kind of seemed like he escalated really after the medication.
Mm. So, can you walk me through? And again, we should have got tissues for this, but I guess can you walk me through your perspective and the day
Oh
that
gosh.
you lost your brother to suicide?
Yeah, I'll never forget it. So at the time, he was living in Georgia with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he had just graduated the year before. So, like I said, he was a teen dad. So, that
The
pressure,
pressure of that.
exactly,
Yeah.
taking care of a child when you're still a child.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember distinctly the day before. Me and my mother's relationship at the time was a little rocky.
Okay.
And she had called me the day before, and we hadn't talked in a while. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we had talked, but not like this.
Not like
We
that.
talked for hours the day before. So I literally remember the full 24 hours from the day before.
Mm-hmm.
So when she called me the next day, I was at work in my car eating lunch. And when she called, I didn't think, I was just like, oh, she's just calling to check in. And I remember her saying that AD had shot himself. And then from that point on, it was just like, okay, what does that mean?
Well, I
Like,
was about to say, yeah.
I think subconsciously I knew that he was gone, but didn't really grasp it at that moment. So I
Mm-hmm.
just kind of wandered. I remember wandering into my building. You know, I always make faces. My face is always twisted
Yeah,
up.
they tell a
They
story.
tell a story. So when I got inside, I remember a coworker, she was in the middle of a conversation and she looked at me and she was just like, "What is wrong?" And I just remember saying, like, my brother shot himself. And she just dragged me in an office and I just like
Lost it.
lost it. Like I just remember like, and they're like, who do we call? I couldn't even think to call my husband. I'm just like, I couldn't function. Like just
Yeah,
completely not blacked out, but it was a complete outer body experience.
gotcha. Whew.
Yeah. I think that's the first time I was able to tell that story and not cry.
Wow. Wow. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. And what do you do after that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and not literally, but
Mm-hmm.
like, how do you even process and begin to, I guess, heal from that trauma that that's like your baby, 13 years apart. That's you've seen him as a baby. You've watched him grow up.
I watched him hold from the day he came home. I remember the day he came home. I remember when my mother had him and we went to go see him at the hospital for the first time
Mm,
till his last day. So
yeah,
to watch a whole lifespan to me is crazy.
yeah, it is. Whew. Um, what has the grief process been like for you? I can't I can't imagine. I'm trying to get myself together in here.
You trying to make me cry,
I
Jackie?
know I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. I just, I feel deeply. And as you were telling the story, I'm sure as the listeners were listening to that, it's just, it's the trauma at that particular time. And it is him being away from you. I know he
Mm.
lives with you for a little while. Um, and you know what I'm saying? I felt you. You know what I mean? I put myself in that predicament of losing somebody and not being able to do anything, especially a younger sibling.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the grief process of that, what has been your grief process of that? And I know there's such a stigma attached to suicide that it's almost, I don't want to say I don't want you to speak to it, but I almost feel like it's a different grief process than just losing somebody from something else. Um, because that's kind of people's first question when you say, "Hey, I lost whomever," right? It's like, "Oh my God, what happened?" Right? And I think that's something that most people don't share. And you kind of sometimes there's actually somebody that I know who lost somebody close. And of course, I never ask the question, what happened? I'm always just like, I'm sorry. But I feel like that it was probably suicide, but I feel like that's not something you can say. Somebody can I don't want to say proudly say, but kind of say, "Oh, I lost my father to cancer. I lost." When you say suicide, I feel like you're looked at differently,
Absolutely.
and so I think you're grieving sometimes at the same time, kind of you're put in this box of, and I don't know if it's shame, right? But like, I think people, I know, listening to you, I know if that was me, I put myself in that, would I have that conversation with just, of course, you wouldn't have it with anybody, but to say that, yeah, I feel like that person is looked at differently. You know what I'm saying?
That person, that person's family,
Yeah.
it is different
Almost like, what I'm saying, you had something
to
to
do
do
with
with
it.
it,
Right.
or
Why
like,
didn't you stop
why
it?
didn't you stop it? Or I just think there's so many different stigmas that come along with suicide, that some people have a harder time grieving just their loss, because people don't recognize suicide like, of course it's a loss, but like other things are recognized. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess when it came to grieving, how did you even start that process? I mean, I know we talked a lot around that time, and I tried to be there the best way that I knew how. But if I'm honest, I could relate to a portion of it, but I couldn't, you know what I'm saying? I couldn't relate. I always was like, you know, you had him 19 years. I only had my sister for 10. So, like, I tried to look at it through that lens. I know that's not, everybody's lens of it, but, you were blessed enough to have 19 years to, you have a niece or a nephew?
A niece,
A
yeah.
niece, right? I thought it was a niece out of it that you still get to see him in her. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I know I always tried to give you that positivity and just be, a shoulder to cry on when you needed to. But I guess what was your grieving process? And I know grief doesn't necessarily end. I hate that people think that it does.
It is forever.
Yeah. So I guess how did you grieve? What kind of kept you above water? What kind of kept you functioning and as successful as you are, and just being the mom, being the wife that you are?
So initially, I remember the day after his funeral, I will say I could not get out of bed that day. Like, it was like my body had completely shut down.
Yeah.
Like, I just couldn't move.
Yeah.
But from that point on, if it wasn't for me having young kids at the time, because at the time my son was 5 and my daughter was 1.
Gotcha.
So it was like, okay, you got young kids. You just can't lay in the bed all day. You do have a job. You got to go back at some point. And of course, I had a husband, or I have a husband.
Yeah.
So you still got to do those day-to-day things. But you're just kind of like, did that really happen?
Did it happen?
And he had been staying with us the month before he passed. So
Yeah.
from March, he had been there. And then in the beginning of April, he went down to Georgia to stay with my parents.
Gotcha.
So it was kind of like, okay, well, I know that it happened, but I wasn't seeing him every day, so maybe I could just act like this didn't happen. That's you have to kind of play with your mind a little bit.
I love that you said that. I love that I've never shared this a day in my life with anybody, but I remember when my sister died, and I would just pretend that she was in another room when I was in the house. The things that, of course, went through my head, not getting therapy, and everybody else kind of acting as if everything was okay. I remember if I was at the grocery store, I'd be like, she's at home in my head. And I've never said that out loud because I sound so crazy. So when you say that, I totally relate to that. I totally understand that. I was just like, I don't know if that's considered avoidance. I don't know what that was. Like,
it's called survival.
Yeah, and you ain't never lied. I was about to say maybe that was what kept me sane, like you said, kept you sane. But I don't know that I ever thought about that. I never thought to share that with anybody, because of course I would think they would look at me like, what in the world is wrong with me? But it's real. It's real. And that's what trauma does to you. Did you ever see counseling?
I did. So my mother stayed up here longer than my father. I think he went back sooner. And then she stayed up here for a little while, I guess, just to be here, make sure we were all right.
Yeah.
So I found a counseling specific for suicide survivors.
Okay.
I did like a pre-counseling session. I was like, let me just see if this is something we really want to do.
Yeah.
So I went. I thought it was good. I brought my mother and my sister the next visit.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you guys did family counseling.
We did one session of family counseling.
Okay.
And my sister was, at the time, she was just like...
She wasn't ready.
She wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Everybody grieves differently.
I agree.
So how I handled it isn't necessarily the way that she had to handle it. And the same thing with my mother. So... my mother was kind of like his diary. She went to him, he went to her with everything. Mm-hmm. So I can't imagine what she was feeling at the time. And even, I don't want to leave my father out.
Yeah.
He didn't know what my mother just sat and talked with my brother for hours on end. They were like freaking frack.
Yeah.
So we went to that one session and it was okay. They just were like, I can't do this. I went back for a couple more visits to where it became group therapy with different survivors.
Okay.
I think I went 3 more times, and then it was just like, I can't do this week after week after week.
It was too much.
It was too much.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to get stuck in that deep grief.
Gotcha.
Because I felt like I would have never been able to move out of that.
Gotcha.
So, that helped. And then I think my kids kind of forced me through. It was weird because I got to a point where I didn't even want to say his name.
Why not?
Because, not that I didn't want to say his name, but it was like a trigger. Like,
it made you remember that.
Just saying his name just brought on an outburst. Like, it was just like, I don't even want to think about him not being here.
Gotcha.
So I did, like I said, I did a couple of sessions, and then it was just kind of like life moved on. I did some, I don't want to say I read books, but I would just do online searches, read articles, things like that.
Gotcha.
And then I got to a point, now mind you, this was 11 years ago. So around, 2021? Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
So I know, I'm like, ugh. So 2019, I was looking online, and no, I take that back. So 2018, my sister signed us up for this survival walk.
Okay.
Through the American Foundation for Suicide Awareness. Suicide Prevention.
I didn't know that they even had that.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So it's called, I think it's called A Walk in the Dark. And it's just strictly family members of those who have passed away from suicide. So it's kind of like a club I don't want anybody else to have to be in, but it's kind of like this non-judgmental place where you walk, you make T-shirts, you make signs, and they have them all across the state. And you just walk with that person's name or face on you.
Okay.
Just to show, you're still thought of. Yeah. Kind of like grief counseling in a way, but you're not talking. You're just taking a nice little walk.
Yeah.
So that helped. And then I was just like, this sounds like a nice organization. So then I just did some more online research, and I found that they have what's called a Healing Conversations program. Yeah, so I was like, oh, this is pretty good. So at the time, I was just like, I want to do this, but I don't know if I could do this.
So what does the healing conversation, is that you talking to other?
Yes. Okay. So, of course, they interview you, make sure that you're in a mental place where you can be a help to someone else. Okay. So much time at this point, it was like 8 or 9 years, I was able to mentally talk about them and not break down.
Gotcha.
So I went through the whole interview process, and then how it is the recent suicide survivor, they request someone reach out to them.
Okay.
Just to have a conversation. So it's a healing conversation. So
is it just one conversation?
It's just one conversation. Okay. Because we're not therapists. So I mean,
we all are in our own right.
Right. Yeah. In some kind of way.
Yeah,
yes.
You are.
So it's just kind of connecting you with someone that has a similar loss. Okay. So they try to match you with someone that's had, a sibling loss or a spouse or a parent. They try to match you up that way. So it's someone that can really relate to what you're going through.
I love that.
Yes. So to me, it's a great program. I wish I would have known about it back then, because it would have been nice to just have somebody on the phone. Now with COVID, it's over the phone. Yeah. But back then, they had people come to your house if you wanted them to come to your house.
Oh, nice.
So it's just like a nice non-judgment conversation.
I was about to say a safe space to talk about the loss, the great loss that you had.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. So now that you're a part of the program, have you had any of those conversations yet? Have you started?
I have. I've had conversations. I can't talk about the conversation.
Of course. No. We would never want to. But
to me, the first one that I had, I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous.
Okay.
When they asked me that I want to take it, I'm like, oh my gosh, can I do this? I was like, am I going to break down in the middle of this conversation?
Yes, you can.
But I did it. And it felt good to be a help to someone else.
I love that.
It did. Of course, at some point, I didn't let that person know that I was bawling on the other side of the phone.
Yeah.
But it was nice to kind of hear not nice to hear someone, I don't even want to say that,
but nice to connect to somebody.
It was nice to connect to somebody that was going through that same thing. And just to let them know that you're not alone.
You're not alone. I was about to say, that's always, and not to cut you off, but that's always an amazing place to be, no matter what the topic is. Even as hard as suicide is to deal with, you want somebody who understands.
Yes.
And to be in that safe place, and for you to be able to use AD's life to help somebody get through whatever they're going, and your loss of him and that whole process is amazing, and I love that you're doing that.
Oh, thank
I
you.
do. I mean, you're a blessing to me in general, of course, but I just know that is suitable. And I feel like sometimes God has this crazy way of kind of planting you in a place that, to help others, even through your pain. Do you
Hmm.
feel like you're healing through that process?
I do. I did reach out to them and say, I like that program,
Okay.
but to me, I would really like to focus before it gets to the suicide part.
I love that.
Like, I feel like we don't look at mental health issues at the younger age, middle school.
Yeah.
I think people just think, oh, it's just hormones they acting out. No, these kids are really going through stuff.
Yeah.
It's
No.
it's not starting in late high school. It's starting in middle school, sometimes late elementary school.
I know.
So I feel like if we started having conversations
At that
at that
point.
point, maybe we can try to avoid the suicide part.
Yeah, yeah, prevention.
Yes.
Prevention. I totally, totally agree. I think about that. I think me and you have a conversation about my younger son, how closely I watch him, just in general, because I know that kids aren't going to tell you everything. I
Mm-mm.
know it was hard for me being a child. I have no idea what it's like to be a little boy
In
in
2021,
2021.
with all the access of things that
I was
they
about to
have.
say all the access, all of social media. I think social media plays a huge part in, that I think about, all the crazy stuff that I can go back in my head and talk about that happened in high school or whatever, but there's no record of it. And now we actually have phones that could record. So one incident that you were embarrassed about for maybe a week that people saw, you're seeing your whole entire life. And I know with the whole bullying aspect of things and just, the trauma that kids are affected by, even COVID, you know what I mean? Like not being able to be around people right now. My son is or has always been outgoing, always playing sports or whatever. So when COVID shut down, it was just like a whole 360. And now he's very comfortable in the whole 360. And sometimes it scares me. I'm like, okay, my oldest son kind of went through the same stage, but I was watching my oldest and I'm still watching my younger one too. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, things that we don't think about. So I guess as far as prevention, what do you think we can do better as parents, first of all, right?
We know our kids better than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be aware of the changes
Okay.
and look at the signs.
Yeah.
So you know your son. So you know that if he likes sports and then he wakes up one day and says, I'm not playing football or basketball anymore, you're like, why? And he just can't give you a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just flat out like shuts down everything, or they can't sleep, or they start
Mm.
giving away all their stuff, or they just have
Wow.
these real drastic changes that just don't make sense.
Gotcha.
Those are flags.
Those are flags. Yeah. So parents, as you guys are listening, because I know we have tons of parents that listen in on a podcast, but watch your kids. And I know it's so hard kind of in the day and age we live in, though COVID has slowed us down. I'm guilty of this. I'm busy.
Mm-hmm.
I have work, I have this, I have that. So sometimes those things it's like, did I miss that? And you can, you know what I mean? And again, I try to keep a good eye on that. What do you think about for school systems? I don't know that schools, and I have to ask my kids, but I don't think that I talk to them probably more about mental health than anything because I'm so big on mental health for myself and just in general. But what do you think schools need to do? Because I agree with you. I think that it's getting younger and younger, and they have access to like we have, which is really really sick. But they can even Google how,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
which freaks me out, right?
Everything is on the internet.
Everything is on the internet, and it's just, like you said, sometimes over access, it's great to be able to connect to somebody in this, state or this country or whatever, but there's so much craziness on there. It's like you don't want to not trust your kids to a certain extent where they're locked down because that's not good either. But I just feel like, do you feel, and this is my thought, feel like there should be conversations at those levels about mental health. Mental health is one of those things. It's weird. It's like We go to the doctor for everything else. We will go, you have a pain, you like, I'm going to the doctor. You know what I mean? I have anything going on. We are keen to show up and sit in front of the doctor. But I think because it's such a stigma attached to those things, and I can even say that I've definitely been suicidal in my life twice, and I never thought to get help. Like I never thought to, hey, maybe I should like something's really, really, really wrong. Um, where I needed to like go to a doctor. I've never considered medicine or anything like that, and I don't feel like I need it. But I think there's something attached to that, even if you do have that that feeling or that thought, that people kind of get shunned away in that
Mm-hmm.
area. So, what do you think about like programs for children at that, what I mean, at elementary age or middle school age? We talk about sex in schools, right? So, and again, something that, we talk about the birds and the bees and whatever to prevent pregnancy, but I feel like what are we really doing about that in, all the mental health issues that we're having and seeing and how much it's growing instead of, decreasing here. Like what do you think about that?
So I think it should really be, I don't want to say mandatory,
I would say mandatory. Go ahead.
but I feel like it's something that should definitely be in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think you probably would get some pushback from parents.
Do you?
Yeah, just for the simple fact that it's such a touchy subject.
Okay.
And you may have parents that feel like, I know my child is going through some things. I don't even want to put this thought in their
In
head
their
because
head.
they may act on that thought.
Mm.
And I'll be honest. So I didn't tell my son at the time, so I was 13 years older than my brother.
Mm-hmm.
My brother was 13 years older than my son. So it was like that weird connection.
Okay.
And he idolized his uncle. That's the only first generation uncle he's
He
ever had.
had,
Right.
yeah.
So I wasn't honest with him when how he died. I kept that from him. It wasn't
Mm.
until maybe 5 years ago
That you
that
had
he
that
found I didn't have
conversation.
that conversation. So a relative accidentally, and they didn't do it on purpose, but
Yeah.
they accidentally said something and it triggered him to think, like, to put the dots together.
Yeah.
And he was just like, wait, what? Is that what happened? And he flipped out.
Oh.
And I guess I could say I'd probably be one of those parents to say I probably don't want my child in it because I saw at the time we did see some signs, where he just seemed like sometimes he was depressed. And depression can run in families.
Yeah, it's
So it was
something.
kind of something like, I don't know if I want to expose him to how he lost his
Mm.
idol. But now looking back, yes, I think it's something that parents need to have their child in, just
Yeah.
because it lets them know, like, if you're having these feelings, it's not just you. You're
Yeah.
not alone.
Yeah.
And there's help.
Yeah.
You can get help.
Yeah. I was about to say that. I said I think sometimes, and I think as parents we're always trying to do the best for our children, but I feel like kids know more than we think that they know. They are way smarter than we give them credit for. And sometimes knowing things, I always hated as a child the cover up of things, and I know it was done in a grace place of them thinking like I wasn't ready to know certain things, or they weren't sure how that would affect me, but I feel like I was strong enough to take that.
But your parents don't know. They look at you like,
Yeah, they look
that's
at I
my child,
know.
my baby. Like,
Yeah,
I don't want
baby.
to.
And I know I could and I understand both sides. I've been the child as you were talking. I'm like, dang, there's some things in my life that I learned later on in life, and I was more upset of them keeping it from me, and it was hard. I don't know if I can't say it's harder for me to process, but I felt like I had a harder time processing it older than younger. And I'll tell
Okay.
you why, because I had created this whole story in my head of those things, right? And it was like, I hated that they didn't tell me the truth because I feel like my actions and recourse in those particular areas, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but would have been different had I known. So I agree with you. I think there would be both sides of the fence, but I feel like the same way it should still be an offer.
Right.
Because I'm trying to think, do I have to sign when they're doing sex ed for my
I
children?
think you
Do
do.
we have to
Yes.
sign?
Even
Okay.
when they talk about puberty, they send home a
I
permission
was about to
slip.
say they, but I would love to have that open up to kids, because what you said, I'll bring it back, is that people want to know that they're not alone. And it's no different than the healing conversation, is no different than even this space. Like, this podcast is for that. This special podcast about suicide is for that, because I want people to really listen in to someone who is a survivor of someone who committed suicide, and you survived it in the sense of some people everybody, I can't imagine, you said if certain things wouldn't have happened, you don't know if you could have climbed yourself out. So who knows what that brought on for other people. But I guess what I do want to know, when you say prevention, like, and you want to do more of the prevention, how are you looking to do that, or what are you planning to do in that area?
So the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they do have different areas where they reach out to different school districts, and they do programs.
Okay.
Right now it's hard with COVID.
Yeah.
You ain't getting into nobody's school.
I know.
Talking to nobody's child
Yeah,
about nothing.
about anything.
So I'm hopeful that once, say, maybe September rolls around and everybody's back in school, that's a area that I could really dive in deeper to.
Yeah. And I think you would be again, y'all, the heart that you have, the heart for your brother that you have.
I'm gonna ride for him forever.
I know, and you always did. And I love that, though he is no longer here with us, that he's living through you in the sense of what your work will be as you move forward.
Yeah.
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 No, I just think that if we can really change the narrative and take the stigma off of suicide,
Yeah.
I think that would really help a lot of people.
Yeah.
I really do.
So how do you think we go about doing that, though?
Acknowledging it.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that it's not the devil.
No, it's not the devil. It's not.
It's a hormonal imbalance, depending on what the cause of it is. Some people suffer from depression. Some people schizophrenia, drug abuse. There's all different things, that financial hardships that lead people to make that decision.
Yeah.
If we just stop acting like that is not a cause of death, I think we could really help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you about the Instagram post that I saw earlier today.
Yeah.
That really made me feel some kind of way. So I won't say the bishop's name.
Yeah.
But there's a well-known bishop that put up a IG post this morning. Mother's Day was just Sunday, talking about the soul survivor, and talking about mothers who have lost their children.
Yeah.
And they talked about every example of a mother losing their child. Except suicide.
Yeah. I think for especially our community, I'm going to be very honest, I really don't think that I think it's getting better if I'm, and it depends on what house you sit in.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's getting better. I actually went to a conference, which was a faith-based conference, and they had a therapist there who's a faith-based therapist, and she talked about everything. So I think it's getting better. However, I still think we have the old traditional things, like God will fix everything, and anything that is things that people can't necessarily explain.
Yes.
That it is the devil.
And they'll tell, the first thing is, oh, you could pray it away. Yes, we can pray.
We can pray,
but we need something besides that.
And I think here's the thing, when people interpret whatever you read the correct way, it's like faith without works is dead, right? And I love God,
Mm-hmm, yep.
I love the Lord. I love the Lord. I love God. But I also think that the Lord provides us with resources. I love God, but I go to the doctor. If I felt like I was having a heart attack, I'm not going to the emergency room. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely
I'm not
right.
going to be like, let me pray this away. Um, so I think people need to be more realistic in that. And I think the old church, um, old religion, and then just sometimes people have been taught things that are wrong by people that they love and had good intentions, but it's not right.
Right.
So I think that there's a space for that, even in all, not just my religion, but in all religions, to really address that. I think is no different than bringing it into school. Probably going to be one of my, I'm in school to be a therapist. We'll see what thus saith the Lord, because he's
You'll
been
be
pushing me.
fine.
He's been pushing me all different ways, but that's actually one of my places that I want to do. I want to do faith-based counseling. You know what I mean? I 100%, of course, believe in God. I'm not exempt to, my actual religion or anything, but I believe in God or whatever people believe in. But um, mental health is real.
It,
And I talked about that on a podcast. I don't know, you probably didn't listen to the episode yet, but I remember, even not even to suicide, but I remember, me and my mom having a conversation about losing my sister. And I said to her, "You never even asked me if I'm okay." And her answer to me was that I prayed for you. But the generation that my mom comes from, that is what she's been taught to do. So she is only giving me what she could give me.
right.
So in that, again, I'm in a different place to even understand that. Had I heard that years ago, I probably would have reacted in the way that I reacted. But I think we need to take that stigma off and acknowledge that even in the audience of who, the post that you sent me, that there's probably somebody sitting right in that audience who, or probably a number of people who have lost their sons to suicide.
And
and
daughters. Let's not
and
leave out the
daughters,
girls.
yeah. But I mean, of course it was a Mother's Day thing, and I was just thinking sons because I was thinking AD, but both. But I don't know if we'll get to a place. This space is a space not only for being safe and vulnerable, but it's my prayer that it'll change people's thought process lens, and that it would really provoke thought
Mm-hmm.
about how we look at certain things. And probably, I don't even know how far back. I don't know if I would have looked at it the same. You know what I mean? I can't say. Um, but I think we need to talk about it more, and we need to do exactly what we're doing tonight more, that people know that it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we want to prevent it as much as it is, but if people have suffered that loss, that it's acknowledged and not kind of swept under the rug and put into that box of secrets
Exactly.
that the family doesn't talk about. I love that you were honest with your son.
Well, I had no choice.
Well, sometimes, and my saying, or the saying is like, what is always in the dark shall come to the light. Is that sometimes what or how you probably would have told him, or what you would have told him, you would have rather not been pushed in the corner to tell him. But who knows? You know what I mean? It probably helped him. Maybe he didn't understand it at first, but who knows? I think you will later on in life know. But I think that's one of those things that we have to get more comfortable with. If that does happen, not hiding that from the family, because what if, God forbid, what if somebody else in the family is having that same thing? And like you said, some of those imbalances run in families.
So it's funny that you mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
because he's actually not the first in my family. I don't know if I ever
Wow.
told you that.
No, I don't think you ever told me that.
My dad is the seventh of 8 children.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually lost his younger brother to
Mm.
suicide.
Wow.
So that happened before my brother even was born. So he never met that uncle.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like deja vu all over again. So
Yeah.
my father can relate to my pain as far as losing
His younger
his younger
brother.
brother. And now, unfortunately, he can relate to the pain of his father of losing his youngest son. So
Wow.
it's mind blowing that it's like, okay, not one, but now two.
Two.
And I think that honestly did play a part in me keeping it from my son.
Being nervous that he
Right.
would, yeah.
Because he was, and still to this day, even at times, he's so much like my brother. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so much like your uncle.
He looks like him too.
He
He
looks like
looks
him
like, I was
too.
about to say, he looks
Well,
just
we
like,
all look
yeah,
alike,
y'all all
so
look
yeah.
alike, yeah.
But it was just that fear of I don't want this to be part three.
Got you.
So
I
if I
understand that. I got
so if
you.
I can keep that from him, fine. You're right though. Looking back now, would I have wanted to break that news to him at 20 or 21? Could he have really handled it
Mm-hmm.
the way he did? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not gonna lie. It was a rough like week.
Yeah.
But I think he was able to process it,
Mm-hmm.
adapt, and then move forward.
Yeah.
So it may have been the best thing to happen. Him learning that way, because I'll be honest, it was like a secret, like, and it may be why sometimes I didn't talk about my brother as much as I should have,
Got you.
because it's like I don't want to slip up
And
and
say,
say.
yeah.
So yeah,
Wow. So I first of all, I thank you for coming here.
thanks for having me.
I thank you. I know the listeners will thank you for this because this is a tough conversation, and we've talked about tough things. You had me in here crying, but I want to first and of course I'm going to of course load your Instagram or Facebook, whichever you're comfortable with, because I want anybody who listens to this that needs to have a conversation to 100% reach out to you, and I know you're
Absolutely.
open to that. So I think on Facebook you're just Africa Lee dash Wilson
Nelson.
Nelson. I'm
Mm-hmm.
about to say Wilson, Lord Nelson.
You about to have my
And
husband be
that
like,
your
who's
husband
Wilson?
like, oh, I'm sorry, Anton. I'm sorry. I mean, no different. No, I want no problems. Um, and then on
Instagram,
Instagram,
I think is Africa J78.
9878.
Maybe, yeah, it's Africa underscore nine eight
Underscore
seven
nine
eight.
eight seven eight.
Yes.
Yeah, I got you. But I'll put all that in there so people can reach out, or if they have anything. Can you give, I guess, do you have any words of wisdom that you want to share with any of the listeners or anybody who is either dealing with those places of, I don't want to say darkness, but I just feel like those dark places, or has lost somebody to suicide and is just in the grieving process of, you know.
Yeah, so for those that may know someone that's struggling, um, if they're giving you warning signs or they're saying things to make you believe that they would hurt themselves, don't take it lightly. Don't think you're overreacting. Get them help. Um, you can call crisis hotline. I don't want to say call the police first, because we all know how that can turn out sometimes with mental health phone calls.
Yeah.
But take what they're saying seriously, because you don't want to have that conversation with the person and then they do something and then you're living with the regret of, if I would have just called somebody.
Gotcha.
So take that seriously and just be there for them.
Yeah.
Be that non-judgmental ear that they can talk to.
Yeah. That
Just
space.
just let them talk. And then for those that are going through it, life is hard for all of us.
Yeah.
But just know that don't make a permanent decision for a temporary problem, because you can't come back from it.
Yeah.
My niece will never know her dad the way that, my son kind of knew him.
Yeah.
So if you have children, think about your children, think about your parents. One thing I would say, and I don't want to suggest this, but I would probably say, if you're somebody going through it, go sit at one of those survivor meetings and listen to those people tell their stories. And then ask yourself, do I want my mother or my father sitting up in this group? Do I want my sisters or my brothers sitting up in this group? Because it's real.
It's real.
So
that's great advice. I have no words of wisdom on this one. I think you said a mouthful, and I think that the people that listen will be saved or save somebody else's life and know how to.
I hope so. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me. If they're having problems, call 1-800-273-TALK. Talk to somebody.
I know that's right. Y'all heard it. Tell them the number one more time.
1-800-273-TALK.
Yeah. So we are out of here. I love you.
I love you too.
Oh, I'm so glad that you came.
Thanks for having me.